I mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal,
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.
Hello and welcome to Nature Talks podcast, the podcast where we explore the stories of people reshaping our relationship with the natural world, one inspiring conversation at a time. I'm your host, Irfan Firuzi, and today we are diving deep into the world of biodiversity. Let's say perhaps biodiversity building, rewilding, and meaningful climate action. Whether, of course, you're a lifelong conservationist or someone just starting to think about your impact on the planet, I think this is the episode for you. Today's guest is someone truly special. Oliver is, of course, a biodiversity builder, founder of Wildya, a LinkedIn top green voice, and a passionate advocate for turning eco-anxiety into action. He's someone who doesn't just talk about change, he's making it happen. Oliver, welcome to Nature Talks podcast.
I have a really pleasure. I hope I can live up to your really kind intro.
Thank you. So, of course, Oliver, I'd like to, of course, start at the beginning, because, many of us feel that spark for nature as kids, but only, a few turn it into a full-fledged mission. So what first inspired you to become a biodiversity builder? And of course, how did your journey lead to the founding of Wildya?
Yeah, so the journey was definitely not a straight one. I think as for so many of us, I was really obsessed with wildlife from the get-go. Since I was really young, I was just always playing with animal toys, was spending time in nature, was always learning the different names. And so the people even told me I was a bit like a encyclopedia, which was something before Wikipedia for the a bit older folks that might still know that. And I was very lucky that my parents, that really nurtured that. So they often took me actually into the National History Museum of Berlin, which is really epic because we have this massive Brachiosaurus skeleton and so forth. And I became such a frequent visitor that they even gave me free entry. Just because I kept bugging my mom every day. They also took me to zoos, and they took me really into nature, into forest and so forth. And so I was really privileged that, they gave me this opportunity to learn more about our natural world. Then fast a bit forward, teenage times. As a teenager, I started to realize a bit okay, not everybody seems to be as passionate and as loving of nature as I was. And so I try to fit in, I think, as so many of us do when they are teenagers. So I focus on other things like sports and mostly soccer. I really like soccer and partying and all the rest. And so lost myself there a bit. And then I went to Australia for a year after my high school. And I just realized, okay, why should I live a life? Why should I try to hype myself if I'm really just passionate about the natural world? Why should I live up to something that maybe other people want from my life and not what I really want to do? And then I was standing a bit at the crossroads. I had to decide, okay, but what could that now mean? What do I actually want to study now? And back then I came to the realization that businesses are really on the forefront when it comes to destroying nature. And so they have a lot of power. So I was I think I should study business so that I can understand how the system is working and how the different techniques that they're using that is currently leading to nature destruction. How can we maybe use those really powerful techniques to actually restore nature at scale? And how can we make the business world, instead of the destruction, a force for regeneration? And so I decided to actually not study zoology or marine biology as I initially wanted and so forth, but I decided to go the business route. Fast forward then again, as always, I lost myself again because now you're surrounded by business folks and biodiversity was not really on the top agenda. But luckily I kept a bit persistent. And when I was an intern and when I was working in the different industries from mobility to e-commerce to travel tech, I realized, okay, apparently biodiversity is just not a priority in a lot of companies. And so at first I tried to change it from within. And then I sooner or later said you know what? nobody seems to take this really seriously. So I'm going to go out, found my own business, Wildya, and try to challenge from the outside.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a truly amazing story, especially from the beginning, you know. And of course, that's beautiful because when we look at it now, most of the youth, especially who are active in the fields of climate change, biodiversity, had the sort of same spark of curiosity as yourself, you know, finding specimens in museums, questioning why can't I see these anymore as often. It's a similar case with me as well. So all the animal toys, and a huge example that I think you personally set is how you completely went to a different path that had very little to do with nature, and you found yourself back again and back to your passion. So it's a huge inspiration that you're showing that no matter what our background is, we can always find our path to saving the planet or doing something about it. And I know that as I was going through your profile in particular, you mentioned that you have set a bold target for 2024, helping 30,000 people while restoring 6,000 meters square of nature. So what motivated you to set such an ambitious goal, and what steps are you taking, of course, or you took to make it a reality?
Yeah, I always like to set myself like ambitious goals that really scare me. Because I believe I work this way, that I get really motivated by things that really scare me at the beginning of the year or beginning of the decade, just that I make sure I take my decisions based on the goals that I have. And so, for example, for 2030, I still haven't given up, even though right now it doesn't look like I managed to get the track record, but I want to protect 1% of this entire planet, because until 2030, we need to protect and restore 30%. And so I was like, okay, I can't do this all by myself, but what is a really audacious, ridiculous moonshot that I can put myself with my activities and with my company to say like, okay, we try to contribute to that. And I said like, okay, maybe we can be super bold and say like, we want to contribute 1% for this. And what then happens is, first of all, it's super audacious, so it's scary. But what you do by doing that is like, it helps you to prioritize and to focus a lot. So it makes a lot of decisions for you, because now you have to think differently. Because if you only think, let's say, really only locally, you won't get to that goal, you know? Or if you think like, you can use it without tech, it's probably not going to really happen, because tech is often like it really allows us to scale. No matter how it's used can always be debated, and I'm pretty sure we're going to go there in our conversation. But in order to scale really restoration and nature protection, you need to have probably some sort of tech involved if you want to scale a lot in a short period of time. And so that's a bit like why I did it. And then how I always want to do it is threefolded. So we are basically, I see our nature work that needs to happen in 3 stages. A bit from a business perspective, a bit as a funnel. So at the top we have awareness. So first we need to create awareness so that people are even aware that this is an issue, that is important for them, that is really crucial for their businesses, that is really important for the governments and so forth. So first it's awareness, because all the other steps, they won't follow. If people don't know that this is actually a challenge and that is starting to impact their life, why care, you know? So that's the first one. And that's a lot done through all the different things that I do, from writing on LinkedIn, on like publishing books, keynotes and so forth. And so trying to find different formats, how people can get exposed to this topic, because if we don't expose them, nothing gonna happen. The second one is knowledge, because now you're exposed, but so what? You know, like now you are overwhelmed with like, oh my God, this is how it currently looks like. What am I gonna do? Can I do something? Is it too late? And so forth. So the second piece that needs to come is knowledge. And so we see that a bit in the climate movement is not everybody needs to become a climate scientist, but what we have as a society by now is we understand climate change is real. We understand there's some science that is backing it up. We have the carbon ton, we have the greenhouse gases. We know that it's connected. Extreme weather events are connected to that and so forth. So there starts to be a bit of a base when it comes to knowledge. I think when it comes to biodiversity, we don't have that yet. So people have just naturally a connection to nature, but we got so disconnected, especially in America, in Europe and so forth. We get so connected from our natural world that there's a lot of knowledge that we need to recreate and reconnect people to. It's just that people understand, like, okay, if I do certain actions, like eating a lot of meat or buying a lot of clothes or using a lot of water, that actually has an impact on the natural system, and that we can't keep on taking out and out and out without putting something back in. So that's the second part. And we do this then a lot about, like, okay, social media and, let's say, newsletters, they only go as far. We try to provide them really like this platform that we built this community, so that we upskill people when it comes to biodiversity knowledge, but also the business knowledge, so that they can, no matter what kind of biodiversity projects they are working on, that they have an easier time to raise awareness, create attention, create sustainable business models, so that they can scale their impact and so forth. And the last one, and that's the most important one that I try to tackle, is action. It's nice if you have awareness, it's really nice if you have knowledge, but you need to come to action. And ideally, what I try to do is I try to remove all the obstacles in that funnel, so that you can arrive at action as soon as possible. Because as we said a couple of minutes before, 2030 is a really important year where we see again, like, where are we currently standing in our relationship with nature. And right now, it doesn't look good. And so we need to be faster and we need to be bolder. So how can we really create action? And I think a lot of action comes by giving people agency, so that they know I can actually do something. If I'm on an individual basis, in my community, in my government, in my company, there are things that I can do so that we can start to boost biodiversity. So first one, agency, and the second one, giving them everything from the resources, the community, the best practices, from role models that have done it before and so forth. Giving really, like, we have so many schemes how you can get rich quick. I think we need more schemes of how we can get biodiversity rich quick.
That is true. I completely agree with it. It makes a lot of sense, because I think that's an issue I am also personally, tackling. As you mentioned, there's not much going out there on biodiversity, despite the fact that people must understand climate change and biodiversity are sort of twins. One affects the other. You cannot talk about one without talking about the other. And I think that the fact of the urgency that we have, and all the bold and amazing goals you are setting for yourself, I think the urgency and getting people on board from awareness to action is something that requires a lot of passion and not giving up. So I think that's something else we can personally learn from you. And of course, I imagine that, of course, one of the biggest hurdles is, making people to understand that despite the fact that we are living in cities, really technologically advanced cities, we are still connected to nature one way or another, And when we talk about that, so personally, how do you think, or how through your experience with so many different people, how do you think that we can bridge that gap, especially, when so many feel not just overwhelmed by the magnitude of these environmental challenges, but because of the amount of myths going on that biodiversity loss is not real, animals will adopt, so on. So how do you think can we bridge that sort of gap?
I think we need to increase the amount of nature exposure, so that people just have some more nature touching points again in their daily lives. If you look at I lived in a couple of countries and so forth, so I'm just talking about my experience, but have been living in Paris, in Sydney, in Berlin and so forth, I just realized, like, where is your nature touch point? If you go out of the house, you take the metro to work, you then walk maybe the last bits, maybe you're even in the car and you go the entire time in the car, and then you work, and then you're on your desktop and you just like punch into your computer for 8 hours, then you go home and so forth. Maybe you put on Netflix, you have dinner with your family and so forth. And so where is nature in all of this? Then we go to the supermarkets, we grab our food from somewhere that is also super disconnected from nature. Then we look at a lot of cities, they're often rather gray than green and blue. So where should that be happening? Then we go on Netflix. On Netflix, yes, there are some really great documentaries, but maybe there are 6. And then if you look for murder shows or like dating shows or whatever. There's like thousands of them, so it's just not in relation. Then we open our smartphone and we go on social media, and then again, like, yes, there are some really incredible nature accounts out there, and I'm happy that they now reach sometimes a million followers and so forth. But then again, you put it into context to Cristiano Ronaldo or somebody like that has like 600 million followers, just one soccer player. And then you're like, what the hell is going on? Like, why do we put our priorities there? So I think one is like creating nature exposure through all different areas of our life. How can we bring nature more into supermarkets so that people actually understand the connection between like where their food is coming from and that it's actually coming from nature? When it comes to water, when it comes to having more greener and bluer areas in cities. So a lot of people, they often talk about like we need to bring people to nature, but I think that is really really great to do so. But I think we also need to bring nature to people again. So we need to make sure that if most of us living in cities, that those cities actually look like some sort of ecosystems and hopefully can become really functioning ecosystems as well, not just for us, but also hopefully for other species. And so having nature exposure, if you live in a city, we need to flood social media with nature and nature voices, nature perspectives, what people can do and so forth. We need to expose more like books, movies, in schools, obviously, in university, there is like, we just need to create much more of this kind of nature exposure points and through all our different life areas. Because if we don't do this, then it's just not, it's always going to be an afterthought. But it's too important for an afterthought because literally all of the other things that we do in our life, the clothes that we wear, the kind of big flats or something that we sit in or what we consume, that all doesn't really matter. What really matters is that this foundation of life doesn't get lost, because then we're really in trouble.
Yep, exactly. And that's the sort of unfortunate thing at this stage, that people think that we are so independent from the planet and biodiversity that we don't really need it. And I think that's where people must rethink again, and that's not true. And talking about that, we might be, diverting from the main discussion a bit. But back around 2-3 years ago, I spoke in TEDx and I talked about an acronym called Rewild. Rewild broke down into R, regenerate, E, which was evolve, as in evolve our cities, R again, which was regenerate, so regenerating our natural systems. W was welcoming wildlife, so as we evolved our cities, let's welcome wildlife. I was innovate, so using our innovations to help wildlife reestablish. L was, of course, learn, teaching farmers how to work with nature rather than against it, learning in schools. And D was discontinue. So when I talk to you about Rewild, what is Rewild to you personally?
I love that. You have to send me this one. I love that. I think you really hit on a lot of like key pillars and key challenges and pressure points and opportunities I think that we can do to actually create a wilder world. So I love that. And especially rewilding, I think it's such a powerful, I love the word. I think it's very simple. I think, for example, I use biodiversity a lot just because that is, let's say, a bit of the term that in the group where I want to get attention, that is the word that a lot of people use. So for example, I want companies to change. And so I use that word because in their context, they often like use that, for example, or people inside our bubble, they use necessarily biodiversity. So that's why I use this word. However, I think for the general public, I think rewilding is so much more powerful because it's just easier to grasp what it could be. You don't need to explain biodiversity. Often I need to explain, first of all, what it is. And I think rewilding does that for you. Like you can immediately imagine it. So I love the power already of the word. I think I really love the power of the concept because it's just like right now the nature world is in a really dire state, and I think people need especially positive stories. We tried it over the past decades with like, look at this like whale, look how it's tortured, or and so like there was a lot of like negative kind of pressure that was put on society. Stop doing that because that's like your effect. And I think what we have to try to do now is to mix it up a bit of, yes, that is the reality. And yes, people also need to understand the urgency. However, bring that positive concept of rewilding that shows people like, if we give nature a helping hand, if we reintroduce keystone species and so forth, nature can really come back in sometimes 5, 10, 10 years and so forth. I just had a really brilliant conversation with somebody that is restoring in Mozambique a national park, and in just 12 years the amount of big wildlife 10x in 12 years. So it's just incredible how nature can really recover, but we need to give it a helping hand, and we need to put the resources, and we need to put our minds into it. And most importantly, and that's a bit like the last thing that you shared with Discontinue, is like, we need to really be reflective. Okay, what are currently the most harmful practices that we currently do? And are there ways how we can shift those and invest the money that we use, let's say, for subsidizing meat or fish? Can we use that for regenerative farming and to regenerate our oceans and so forth, and to rewild? And yeah, so it's a really powerful concept that I love to talk about, because it really brings this kind of positive vibes into our entire industry.
I think it is true. Rewild itself is a very powerful word. Biodiversity too, it is. And something I've explained to people, same as you have to explain citizen science. But as you mentioned, it is a point that people sometimes lose in their conversations or their daily lives, is that you're sitting in front of your laptop, for example, at this moment, or your device. You may not know it, but you've got wildlife even there in the most unexpected places. I've personally been lucky enough to see a few myself. Like, you will see sometimes being posted on social media, rare birds is in a city, all bird watchers around. It's amazing how it can be found in the most unexpected places, and that chance is something that we truly need to give it. And I think,
and also like touching on that, like, I was just thinking this morning about this, and that's why I have to share it with you, because you just shared it. Is like, just this morning I saw this like massive crack in the road. Okay. And within that, there was starting to be some first plants and some moss and so forth. And so it's just like always mind blowing to me that of all the places, nature can find like this little niche of something and can bring life back. And this was literally, it was just concrete. There was like nothing. It's just like concrete. And in this crack, there's this moss that says, you know what? I'm going to be here and I'm going to show you what I can do. So.
Yeah, that is true. Even like you mentioned, they've lived in Australia, so there are also dandelions that pop out of concrete and walls, which is it's really extraordinary, especially because of all the insects that feed on the pollen. So but then one thing which is also very unfortunate, in most countries you see people choose to have their own invasive plants, like their own grass and whatnot, rather than the native ones, and they trim the grass. I don't know. Having a messy hair is different than having a messy lawn. I think a messy lawn looks more pretty than a messy hair. So that's what I think, and I think that's why what makes your work so impactful. It's not just about protecting nature, but about reestablishing a sense of belonging in the natural world. So talking about all this, what role do you think communities play in this process?
I think communities right now, that's the beauty of it. I think communities can play a huge role, and I think maybe communities can even be the silver bullet. Why am I saying this? Is that right now there's a really AI, while we record this, AI is really going through the roof, and I think what AI will create is, yes, we're going to get super efficient and we're going to have massive intelligence and so forth, but I think it will create like really also a lot of challenges for humans, because they will feel like, okay, I studied this now my entire life, and now this ChatGPT can do it like better than me and so forth. So we will have a lot of people that also going to be lost, and like, what am I going to do, and what is my purpose, and what is there that I can do in this world, and how can I make this world maybe slightly better, and at the same time also pay my bills and so forth. And I think that's where nature might gonna become really this kind of refuge, where people gonna realize, hey, you know what? There's like so much, I feel so much better when I am in nature. I feel so much better when I feel like I use my hands and there was just bare soil or there was just concrete, and now there starts to be like this mini forest, or I go to the ocean and I start to see more fish, or I start to see more birds and so forth. I think communities, I have a bit of a bet on it, and I'm slightly biased because I try to create a lot of like this community and create like satellite communities in all different cities and so forth. So obviously I'm biased as a community initiator and so forth, but I think it's going to play a huge role, because people nowadays through technology got, on one side we can have this conversation now even though you're a different part of the world, while at the same time a lot of people are feeling very isolated in social media and so forth. So I think if we can create communities where people can come together without judgments, can just have open conversations and can feel heard and just have a smile and have a hug, and then at the same time you say like, hey, you know what, hey, why don't we pick up some trash, or like why don't we make our like grass here a bit greener and really like actually life and actually nature, not just this green nature desert. And I think this will then have some ripple effects, because then more and more people will come together and so forth, and that will lead to changes on the individual level, plus in their companies, plus then maybe they're going to lead to more pressure on governments and so forth. And we always need to keep in mind the percentage always varies to depending on who you ask in the research world, but the maximum that I have read so far is 25% that we need in order to have really systematic a shift. And 25% sounds like a lot, but in the end it's just 1 out of 4. So it's like not crazy. And as soon as you start to make people realize that, hey, food, water, medicine, inspiration, mental well-being all goes up and gets better if we do this, then I think we can pull this off. And I think communities are a key in achieving this.
That is true. I mean, it is really true. If the communities do the right thing at the right time, then I think there's nothing more powerful than having each other's hands, joined together for this cause. And talking about this again, I've noticed that similar to myself, you keep on repeating the word biodiversity. Now, of course, biodiversity aside, what do you think of citizen science and invasive species?
Yeah, no, that's a really brilliant point. I live in Biarritz, which is in the Basque country, in the southwest of France. And we are surrounded. I mean, literally, I'm not gonna like turn on my laptop, but I'm literally sitting right in front of a bamboo bush, and the bamboo is not from here. And also, like, we have Spain here, and Spain has like a huge issue, for example, with eucalyptus that was brought over and that used for timber, and now it has like wildfires there, because in the end it's just not made for this exactly like this ecosystem, and there's no like mechanisms for it to work. And so we surrounded ourselves with invasive species, especially plants. And one of the most critical roles, I would say, is that on one side, I think, especially in the gardening businesses, so in Europe and in the US and so forth, we have these garden centers where you can buy all this stuff. And what always strikes me is that there is actually, instead of selling life, they're actually selling death. It sounds a bit like drastical, but in the end, often, yes, they do sell invasive species, and just like alien species. They're rarely. Last year, I haven't gone this year yet, but last year I was going to this gardens and I was asking them, do you have a section for like native plants? Just like from here, what is native plants? Okay, and then I was like explaining it from France. Okay, yeah, we have plants that grow in France. No, not that grown in France, but like actually really like are naturally to at least France, and ideally it actually be here, because sometimes you have local plants that are sometimes in just like really specific regions. And so I think one is like garden centers. I think we need to take them a bit more, give them a bit more responsibility, that they really have to change this way of like actually supporting more life than what they currently do, because right now it's in the little sections of their garden centers, but it's not, let's say, the major business model. And I think if we change that would already change a lot, because it gives the people by default the option to actually bring life rather than to destroy life. So that's a bit like from the business perspective. And what I like about invasive species and what you said about citizen science is that especially our balconies, our gardens, the green patch in front of our house, that can become actually wilder. We can create that. Like as soon as you really plant like local plants and so forth that are originally here, you will see life, and then you can take all of those really cool apps and you can make pictures of like what kind of wildlife is like now in front of your house, and you will feed more data, and that data will help to see like I actually is all of the different actions that we take locally or that we take on the country level, does that actually create an impact? And I think that's again what we were talking about earlier, where technology can be really powerful because people love their smartphones. And if you now try to find a way how they can meet nature on their smartphone, and that brings them into more nature, and then maybe they leave also their smartphone sooner or later at home and they're going to expose them more and more to nature, then we're going to get there. And we just need to explain it sometimes maybe slightly easier. So instead of talking, let's say, invasive species, we just say like, hey, if you plant this bush, you're going to hear more bird sounds in the morning, and that's going to improve your mental well-being. Maybe easier selling point than let's saying, you know, like if you do this, you're going to kill the ecosystem and so forth. Yeah.
I do agree. I mean, it's a very important part, especially when you mentioned about the plants. The reason I ask you regarding citizen science is, you know, from the last year, my work has mainly shifted from biodiversity advocacy to citizen science. Mm-hmm. And I think citizen science plays a huge role, you know, because with the plants that you mentioned, the plants are a huge contributor to invasive insects at times as well. And as you mentioned, yeah, they are alien species. So, you know, for those who are listening to this, literally invasive species can choke the wild at times, like some weeds and plants can. And what's shocking, you know, personally what I've noticed in some places is the native animals, or let's say, you know, you want to buy native fishes for your fish tank, for example, or release in your pond, or native plants, they're more expensive than the ones that have been, you know, imported, or the the invasive ones, which is really shocking. And I think that the farmers and gardeners and all these, the pet trade especially, they must put more in saving wildlife rather than, you know, exploiting it. Especially we are seeing so many invasive issues, especially Australia is a huge example of paintoads, rabbits, and different, you know, and it's really shocking that how citizen science can help sometimes, you know, finding the invasive species before it gets too late and combating it. And of course, I think, you know, overall the talk we have had so far, it's full of powerful messages. And of course, given this, what advice would you give to someone listening today who feels the same, let's say, eco-anxiety, but doesn't know where to start?
The first one that I would always share is like, yes, really just like go out in nature, spend like 5 minutes or something per day, like really start ridiculously small. It needs to be really like you're gonna laugh about this, how small of an action that is, but just start really, really tiny. Just like go out for 5 minutes and try to keep your smartphone maybe on play mode and just go and try to see, smell, hear what you can see. And quite often you're actually surprised, even in the most bustling cities and so forth, you still always find some sort of life. And I think this is like my number one, because as soon as you realize, okay, nature is still there, maybe it's like different to what I always imagined, and the wilderness that I would love to see, but it is still there, it's still holding on, it's still like fighting, and it will recover if we get our shit together now. Sorry, can I say shit? But yeah, we can get our act together. And so the first one is nature exposure, because it's just like proven to have like positive effects on your mental and your physical well-being. The second one, you already talked about this, community. It's like, I was at so dark places in my life. It was 27, I had like a quarter life crisis, because I realized that I had in my circle, there was nobody really surrounding me that was really passionate about the natural world. I was not really exposed to potential solutions and so forth. And I was just like feeling like all of this burden of the natural world on my shoulders. It sounds ridiculous, but I didn't see other people that were taking this serious. And so I put all of this on my shoulders. So community is incredible to just like ask around, sometimes make maybe a social media post. Hey, I really, shocker for you maybe guys, but I really like birds. Do you have any friends that like birds or whatever it might be that you're interested in, or the ocean or peatland or whatever? And just like trying to get your breadcrumbs ready so that you can, you know, step by step, maybe you can expose yourself to more people that are kind of interested in this too, and that want to do something about this. And that really, really helps, because now you feel less alone, which is important. That's going to improve your mental well-being. Second is gives you often there is already somebody that took some steps before you, so you can learn from that person. You can also learn about the gaps and so forth. So the second one is really about community, and it's also much more fun to do it with others. And the third one is action. So there comes always this moment where you think, if you're going to read more stories, if you're going to share more stories, if you're going to watch another documentary, if you're going to study again, if you're going to, that this is all going to help you to feel better. But what actually going to feel better is like taking action. And even if it's something tiny in your personal life, like, you know what, one day out of the week I'm not going to eat meat. Or maybe you can then go bigger. You can say like, you know what, maybe I will try to dedicate my work life towards something in nature. Or maybe then you can take it bigger. You're going to say like, you know what, actually I'm going to create my own NGO. Or maybe then you're going to take it bigger and you say like, actually this NGO, now we're going to try to create like policy changes and so forth. So you can go like crazy and you can really maximize your impact, but you cannot get there if you never start to take real action. And I think there's this like tendency to think that you need to learn more and more and more, whereas I think you're going to feel much better if you combine this with like acting. That's going to create like, you will just realize when you start taking action, there's going to be gaps. You're going to realize, you did some mistakes. So there will be learning still be involved. And then you always go back to learning from others, but then you implement, learn from others, implement, learn from others and so forth. And I'm going to promise you the best hack was that, and day and night, how my mental well-being is now.
Well, that is, I mean, exactly, what people need to hear, because we need all that small steps, and it's from small steps that and it's really unique that especially those are all people around the world who are passionate about biodiversity, they give a sort of similar action plan. Even last week I think I was on a podcast, and the same question was asked. That's why I asked the same to you, and I told them, start small. Every morning just wake up, go outside, hug a tree, get in, go to school, university, And I mean, it does start small, because once you have that connection heart to heart with nature, you realize, oh my goodness, there's a lot happening, which gonna affect me, my children, the future generations. And I mean, apart from natural world just being beauty, we depend on it, which is something that we all must take care of. And in this day and time, we know that it's all about social media and getting to reach out to people. So you have also been a powerful voice on LinkedIn, so reaching thousands with your insights and stories. So of course, how has social media played a role in building your community and spreading your message? And also, perhaps, how do you think others, those who are in a similar field, can reach out on social media to get people involved on their projects?
Yeah. That's a very powerful and important question, because it's this irony is not lost on me that I'm talking about nature on social media, which is often kind of leading to more disconnection for people in nature. And so that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do that, is because I'm always about being really pragmatic. I love systematic thinking, and I love talking about regeneration, and I love to follow this philosophy, and I love to have like 3-hour deep conversation around the bonfire around it. However, I think it's very, very crucial that we look at like, this is not going to happen like a reset button. It's not like we're going to close the laptop and then we can restart with this like new concept and so forth. It's just not likely to happen. So we need to change the system while the system is still running, and so we need to have pragmatic solutions. And so one of the things that where I know that billions of people is on social media. That's where they are. No matter in which countries you're going to go, by now it's rarely the case that the person is not even on one social media. It's almost like impossible by now. so people are on social media. Okay, now that we know that, what can we do with social media so that nature has a voice, that nature maybe gets reflected and so forth? Because again, if you go into the most feeds, maybe your feed that is now listening to that podcast, maybe your feed is full of nature, but just take a sample of like your 15 friends in your surrounding and so forth, and look through their feeds and so forth. And I have a high guess that the feeds are not going to necessarily look like full of nature, except if you're super lucky and you just surround yourself just with nature dudes. Then maybe yes, but otherwise not necessarily. And so we need to bring nature on the feed. Now, if we have nature on the feed, what do we want to show in the feed? Do we want to show only, let's say, things like what are our arguments and what is the outcome that we would like to achieve with that? Because if we just like have noise on there that doesn't create necessarily change, then why do we do it to begin with? I mean, and then it's really nice that people see, let's say, more videos of elephants and whales, but what do we really want to achieve with that? Ideally, we want them to be exposed to this content, and then we want them to go away with something that they can potentially do, no matter if it's in their community, in their governments, in their company, and so forth. So what my angle with everything that I try to do with my post is like, again, talking about the 3 levels, but within each piece of content. So there should always be some sort of awareness that a lot of concepts people are just not aware. So I try to bring those to the feed. I try to really then provide knowledge. You need to find always the fine balance in social media, because too much knowledge is also going to block. So you need to be very precise, and you can only have like one idea for one post, and you need to be really short. So knowledge, you can give a teaser. You need to get people a bit of the sizzle, so that then hopefully they want to learn more. So what I do in the comment section, I provide more deep dives. So the people that really want to, they can learn much more, but I'm not necessarily trying to pack everything into my one content piece. And the last one that I always try to finish with is like action. Okay, now that I read this, now that I read about invasive species, now that I read about bottom trailing, now that I learned about the power of biomimicry and so forth, what are actions that I can do this week, or that I can do at least this month, so that I can hopefully be a contributor to change? And so what I would, to answer to the second part of your questions, what would I recommend to people is like, if you're listening to this and you think like social media could be a powerful tool, which I think, to be honest, almost like every project could like, in the end it's for free, and it only needs your brain power and your time to decode it and so forth. So the first reflection that I would invite you to is to reflect on like, what do you really like? Do you like writing? Do you like speaking? Do you like taking pictures and so forth? So figure out a bit like, okay, what do you really like? Second, what are you really good at? Because it's really nice if you like it, but like try to then also get better at it. Because if you do it just for a hobby and you just want to do, for example, you like to take animal pictures and you just get hell of a fun out of it, awesome. But if your idea is to try to make positive impact at scale and so forth, then you always need to be a bit more strategical about this. So the second one I said is like, okay, have a look of like, okay, which skill would you like to gain? And then have a look of like, okay, what social media is reflecting that in the best way? So really, really quickly, YouTube, it's long form video. So you can do, for example, this podcast that we do now, you can do really long detailed videos and so forth. You have Instagram or TikTok, which is like really short term. So in 1 minute, you need to be very quick to explain something in front of the camera naturally and so forth. LinkedIn used to be a bit more writing. So if you, for example, like writing, then LinkedIn was a really great place. It's slowly changing to become a bit more visually driven as well. So maybe now if you like writing, maybe rather start a Substack or something. But be really like, try to go on a social media that brings out your best skills, so that you don't have to bend yourself. If you're, let's say, a really great writer and you just try to make shorts work, it's just like, it needs other skills. And so try to be smart about which one you're going to choose, because it's just going to help you like so much more to show up, to really deliver great work and to reach people, because people are going to be on all the different platforms.
Yep, I do agree. I mean, it's a world of technology and social media. So, if those are not on it, usually are I think busy living in other sense, because I think those are also on social media are not living as much. So I think it's an important tool to use if you use it well. So of course, talking about this, we are now reaching the end of our episode. And I think the favorite part of this episode is usually the conclusions. So, of course, looking ahead, Oliver, what's your number one message you would like to give it to anyone with you, especially the youth? What's your number one message?
We all have agency. We all have skin in the game. It's not a topic that we can push aside. We all gonna benefit from having this wilder world, and so I think we all need to try our uttermost to contribute to it to some extent. So yeah, no matter if you're in a community, if you're a baker, if you're an artist, if you're a policymaker, doesn't matter. There will be angles how you can boost biodiversity, and I think it's really fun work and it's really rewarding, because compared to climate, you can actually see the change. So like in climate, it's very hard because it's very macro. So if you take the bike, you're not going to really see necessarily a positive impact. The beauty is with biodiversity you do. If you change your garden to native flowers and everything, you will see a hell of a difference, I promise you. And that's just incredibly empowering. And then now, of course, you can scale that on national park level and beyond. So
I think it's a very short yet important message, especially for the small things we can see on biodiversity. So with that, of course, thank you so much, Oliver, for sharing your insights and passion. Clear that building a wilder world isn't just a dream. It is a very real possibility, thanks to, of course, leaders and people like yourself. So it is an amazing role that we all have. And to all those who are listening to this, thank you for tuning in to Nature Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please, of course, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who cares about our planet, or those who you hope will care for the planet. And of course, in the description, you can find the ways you can all check out Oliver's content. And of course, together, we can inspire more people to take action and reconnect with the wild. And of course, until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and stay connected to nature.
I mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal,
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.